A new art form has emerged, combining music, lyrics, storytelling, and videos to create a wholly new multimedia experience. Brought to you by GEIST MUSIK, created by Martin Nethercutt. Welcome to the story of Martin Cole, a musical trilogy of epic proportions, from rock and roll self-reflection to the depths of despair, to the ascendance into light. This story will captivate you and it will mesmerize you. Before we delve into the world of Geist music, or before we follow Martin Cole's journey, we must understand its creator, Martin Nethercutt. Martin is a singer, a writer. He's a musician, a producer, and the creator of Geist music. Martin considers the Geist trilogy to be his lifetime musical work and achievement. Welcome, Martin. Welcome to the Jeremiah Show.
Hey, thanks, Jeremiah, for having me.
Thank you for being here. I want to get to know you just a little bit here, if we could, to start off before we dive into this incredible storytelling and music and vision that you have laid out for us to enjoy. And you were born in 61 in Kassel, Germany. And I think this is interesting. You grew up with an American father and a German mother.
Yeah.
Now, did growing up, I was thinking about the story and I'm thinking about the music and what we're experiencing here with Book of Shadows. It made me think, with that upbringing, with that time that you grew up, a couple decades after the war, growing up in Germany, like I said, the American father, the German mother, were the way that you were raised in that time period that you were in, did it influence at all how you viewed the world and
Oh,
how
yeah,
you view
of
the world
course.
now?
Yeah, of course. I mean, imagine this. You're growing up, you're 30 miles from the East German communist border on the west side. So in my eyes, Japan, I could travel to Japan. That was closer than 30 miles from my house to go to communist East Germany. So growing up under that pressure dome in the late, in the early 60s, late 60s, the revolution, the summer of love, it was like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm in this little town in the north of Germany with nobody ever heard of, but we had great history. The brothers Grimm, the fairy tale writers, were writing in Göttingen, which is just like maybe 15 miles away from my house. So there's a big spiritual energy in that area, and all the old castle, which comes from the word castle, was an old Roman castle called the Hercules. And my father, my American father, fell so in love with the rich history and the buildings that didn't exist in America. We're a young country now, and so all that depth of, I think, inspired the early influences. And then you put rock and roll on top, and there you
Mm.
have the story.
Yeah, and like almost the birth of rock and roll in that time period.
Sure,
And so
sure.
what did music mean to you in your youth? How did
Well, yeah. So I was, since both my parents were working all the time, I actually grew up with my grandparents, and my grandfather was a big Wagner fan, right?
yeah.
And so The Ring and the Valkyries and all that stuff. So he said, yeah, I mean, it was always the music that inspired him. He would light a cigar in the afternoon, have his schnapps, and listen to Wagner over and over and over again. Only later did I come to find out and realize that Wagner was the godfather of metal. So if you think about his music and the syncopated E minor cello that he puts in, you know, so it always moved me. And then, growing up in a bilingual household, so part of me was German, very proud of it, the history, But it was only 20 years after World War II.
Mhm.
So the wounds and
Right.
West Germany was an American satellite. East Germany was a communist Russia satellite. We were right in the middle of this. I remember the wall in Berlin, when that came down, I cried. I mean, like, holy crap. I thought that would never be demolished. And the first time I went to East Berlin, it was so funny. It was maybe 2 or 3 months after the wall had come down. And the producer said, well, Germany's Got Talent was one of those shows. And he's like, hey, why don't you play bass and sing background vocals for this band? And we'll fly you into East Berlin. Or you can drive with me. I'm like, I want to drive. I want to see what the other side looks like. Right. So we come at this checkpoint, and there's still coffee cups on the table of the East German border guards, and Russian uniforms and cigarettes and machine gun nests and all that stuff. And there were big signs like, you're leaving the West German sector now. If you do not exit, for East German tourists, if you do not exit, you will be fired upon. So that was still happening. And then I come to East Berlin and I see all the poverty and the Soviet style buildings and the desolate, it was almost like apocalyptic, the
Right.
city. So those were really big impressions. And I think from an early childhood, it gave me the motivation, right? But then rock and roll happened. I needed to get out of there. My first Superman comics, I'll never forget that. We went to this NCO club at the Army base near my hometown, where my father was a sergeant major in the Army. And I went into this canteen and I saw the stacks of DC Comics and Coca-Cola and this and that. We were so corrupted. I had no idea back then. And I bought comics and Spider-Man and Batman, and all of a sudden, that vision with German dark heritage, right? We just lost 2 world wars. Everybody was involved. I had the question in history class at my school: ask your grandparents how they were involved in the war. I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay. That for a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
yeah. And some of the teachers that I had were, back in the day, actively involved, and they didn't go to a Nuremberg trial. They were teachers, and they taught German history. It was almost like Hogwarts gone dark, right? I
Mm.
went in the school library, and there was a section that was forbidden, where they had all the SS books from back in the day, and I'm like, holy crap, this stuff is still here, you know so it just formed. You just form when you're that young. You just form a vision of, wow, America's utopia, this shining city on the hill. I want to go there. I know I got to go there. But the first band in high school, and never forget, the first show I saw was Scorpions with Uli Roth and Michael Schenker.
I was thinking Scorpions when you were talking
Yeah,
about the
Michael
wall coming
Schenker, and
down.
I'm there. I'm like a 15, 16-year-old kid, and I'm looking at that band, and Uli was on the left side, it's on top of the PA, and Michael Schenker was on the right, and I'm like, Jesus, that's what I want to do for sure.
Yes. And so is that your kind of the spark and inspiration for your first spiritual rock and roll journey? Did that
Yeah, kind of. Then
spark
my
it?
grandfather bought me my first Hufner 6-string acoustic guitar, and I'll never forget. My fingers hurt so bad because the string, the distance to the fret was like, to the fret was like 3 inches. So I had to press down, right? And it just hurt. And he goes like, well, nobody's going to be perfect unless you start on a crappy instrument.
Hmm.
And so that's how I learned acoustic guitar, and then my first
Earn your
Ibanez.
calluses.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We got to take a break here in just a
Sure.
second, but what a picture you just painted. You were an amazing storyteller in all
Thanks.
ways. I mean, that really painted a picture of what you were going through and what you were seeing, and what brought you to today,
Yeah.
and this project, this
Hmm.
that we're talking about today. We're talking about the Book of Shadows today, but we're also going to talk about the Book of Mirrors, which came first, and the Book of Light, which you're working on right now. Uh,
Triptych.
yes. What is Geist music?
Geist music, I think, is a culmination of musical influences and spiritual insights of my life. And Geist music, we started the band kind of like in 2005. We were jamming around. I was working with a great guitar player, Marino da Silva. And I said, why don't we call the band Geist? Now, the story there was that we went into studios, we recorded everything. We were just this close to going live, to doing some shows. And then everything fell apart. I don't know how, I don't remember how everything fell apart, but I said, why don't I call it Geist Musik? Because there's going to be people that are going to collaborate with you, right? And this is very important to me because if you have, there's some things I can't play. I can't play saxophone, right? Like on the first track, Shadowlands, it's a dear friend, Katja Riekermann. She's German. She played with Rod Stewart's band the whole, like, for 20 years. And I'm like, I need atmospheric things flying around. How about a saxophone that is lonely? And mixing that was so fun because I'm like panning left, right, bringing it back to you, just getting in your skull,
Yeah.
and people always say, oh, saxophone has nothing to do with rock and roll. I'm like, I beg to differ, because it is a very interesting instrument, and when you don't have vocals on a track, you can just feature it, so that's how that came about. I called Katya, she came down. It took her like an hour or so to record me to record
Is she also in the video? Is that her in the video?
Yes, with the
Yeah.
hood.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's take a quick break and come right back. This is fascinating. I want you to go to geistmusic.com. Uh, Definitely wear your headphones, right? Get in,
Yeah,
let Martin get in your head and
yeah,
play around
exactly.
a little in there. The story is pretty incredible. We're going to hear little teasers here coming up and after the break. And we'll be right back with Martin Nethercutt, singer, writer, producer, musician, Geist Music. We're talking about Book of Shadows on this episode. We'll be right back.